We know now to have a Q&A, and if you have any questions, I'd like to answer them. We also, for people who are live streaming, they could text. I've already had a few questions texted to me. They could text questions in at 832-971-3829. So any questions you have here, though? What questions came to your mind? Comment is that it is a process. And in theological terms, we call it sanctification. That's basically what we're talking about. This is sanctification. It's becoming more like Christ. It's what the Holy Spirit does in our lives. It's got a vertical development factor with God and a horizontal piece with others. But it's that sanctification, ongoing process in life. Good. Any other questions? Well, let's take one then that I've been text here. All right, yeah, here's one. This is from someone in Prairie City, Iowa, and they ask, what happens when one gets to the last stage, the remain in me stage, or adult stage, as Paul puts it? The other stages seem to be moving an individual to the next stage, but are you like, you've arrived? And not really, right? If it's like a light where you turn it, you turn the amperage up, you turn it brighter, you just keep getting brighter and brighter. I remember a story, or I was reading an article of an elderly Christian who was a very public Christian, and many people thought he was, someone who'd gotten really close to Christ. And in this article, one of the things he commented on, he said, I thought I'd be closer to Christ than I really am right now. I've still got so far to go. And so it's a never-ending process, right? As you just continue on and on. So great question. Any other questions? Good. Two really good questions. The first one was, where might people be at the place it might be at in a church, and how many people might a church have at each place? There are some tests you could do these days where you could actually see that. Likely, you'll be like the average church, and that is that 40 to 60% of your people will be at stage 2. We have a lot of people who are stuck at stage 2. And so why is the church struggling so much? One reason is we got a lot of people just stuck at stage 2. Some people may think they're at stage 3 and 4, but as they take a test and they answer things, they're stuck at stage 2. For example, one of the questions for stage 4 is, would you give up anything and everything for Jesus Christ? I mean, that's what it's talking about. It's talking about, would you give up anything and everything for Jesus Christ at stage 4? You may say it's hard, but are you that intimate with him you do that? So without knowing your particular church, most churches have between 40 and 60% of their people at stage 2. And some at 1, some at 3, some at 4. So that's the answer to that first question. The second question was, what can you do in worship for the different stages? I mean, that all of a sudden it becomes much more difficult. If you've got people at these 4 different stages and they need different things, how do you do that in worship, and how do you do that outside of worship? And we talk for hours on that. I actually have another talk that's a little bit about that. Just a short thing in worship, and the role I usually play is preaching. What I've started to do is when I get to the end of the sermon, I'm going to apply it. I've used maybe 2 of the stages, and I describe it and then give an application for that stage. So I might say, if you're here today and you believe in God, but you're not sure about Jesus, you're still questioning, you're still asking the questions. What stage is that? Stage 1, right? But I'm not saying that to them, but I just say, if that's where you are, then this may be a way that this week would be good for you to apply this. Now, if you're at a stage where you've surrendered a lot of your life to Christ, and you can go deeper, but you surrendered a lot, you're not quite the center yet, that'd be stage 3, then this might be a way you could apply this to your life. So that's one of the things I do when I'm preaching, and it's different each sermon, so you can if I was preaching every week in a church, then over months you'd be hitting different ones on different Sundays. But there is different styles of discipleship are important for each stage. It is important for a church to see where are we strong and where are we weak, and what can we provide at some of the other stages for people so that they can keep growing? Great questions. I answered both of your questions, right? All right. Okay, this is a good one. Can a person be in the remain in me, that's the last stage, the fourth stage, in one area of their life, characteristic, and another stage in a different area of their life? And yeah, that is possible. I would assume that could be possible. I think what you see more is that it's not just linear where you're here now and then you're here and you never go back. I mean, you've got some days where you really, in your attitudes, you kind of go back to a previous stage. I'm not sure how it would work if somebody is, because the stages are really about your whole life, how you would be one stage in one setting and another stage in another setting. So I don't know. At first I said sure, but I'm not so sure about that. I'd wonder if that's possible. Another question. Here's one. What would a church look like if they did discipleship well? That last question was from West Des Moines. This one I have no idea who it's from. But what would a church look like if they did discipleship well? And there's a number of things. One is that they provide discipleship opportunities no matter where you're at. Most churches do really well with the first two stages and are doing poorly at the last two stages. So people are saying, I've met Christians who say, I want to go deeper with Christ and I've given up on the church because the church isn't helping me at all. And that's sad because the church should be helping us at each stage. So one is having ways to grow at each stage. Another is to ask, with those ways to grow, what does it really take, especially to get somebody to move from one stage to another? So most churches, you've got a clump of people who are stuck at stage 2. What kind of things tend to move people from stage 2 and 3? And focus on that. A third good thing to do is to have a simple process. Sometimes churches see this and they start adding this whole long smorgasbord of activities, and it doesn't, people don't know where to go. But rather say, at this church, if you're in stage 1, this is our primary thing. So, I was in worship at Calvary Church this morning, and there was introduction to a ministry called Mainly Music for Kids. And you could say, at Calvary, most of our people who are in stage 1 come here, they get to know Christ through mainly music, or maybe something else. I don't know what it is, but say, okay, for each stage, this is our big thing at this church. This is what we mean. Now there's other things we use, but this is our big thing. So it's like if you're crossing a stream, when you're hiking and you've crossed a stream and you got all these rocks, you usually have 3 or 4 that are out of the water and there's no moss on them, and if you like to not twist an ankle like me, you walk on those. And there's some daredevils that they want to try the smaller rocks. But like that, in a church, to cross from one stage to another, or to cross in life, it's like you have a big rock for each stage. So what is your main way of people growing at each stage? There's some others they could do, but what is your main way? And so communicate that so it's simple and it's clear. People said, I want to grow at this church. Say, well, at this church, this is the way we tend to do it. This is what we have to help you. So that's a couple pieces to that. I had seen another question here. Can an individual be a Christian and not be a disciple? What do you think? I know there are some people who say you can. They talk about true disciples. And Dallas Willard, I agree with Dallas Willard. He'd say, that doesn't make any sense, because a disciple is someone who's following Jesus. A Christian is someone, the name came from someone who's a Christ one. That's where the name came from, a Christ one. So if you say somebody's a Christian but not a disciple, they're one and the same thing. Now, someone may be stuck at stage 2 for 40 years. That doesn't mean they're not a Christian. They're not a disciple. It means they've just been a stuck disciple. But essentially, being a Christian and being a disciple are the same thing. Great questions. Anybody else have a question here? Yes? Yep. So the question or comment is, could it be that a church focuses, and you're talking a worship setting? You're talking worship?
I guess mostly worship.
Mostly worship. That the language is so in-house language for those who are in stage 2 and 3 and 4. That somebody who's 1, and remember, 1 is not even a follower of Christ yet, right? When you get to the, you go from 1 to 2 is when you commit your life to Christ. That somebody in 1 just can't connect very well there. And you could have a church like that. What you'd want to do then is say, how can we reach these people? And some churches have been successful at, we've got this thing outside of worship that we work with people on stage 1. A lot of churches in the last 20 years have said, let's make our worship service, because most stage 1 people, when they return to church, they return Sunday mornings, so let's make our worship services one that a stage 1 person would feel comfortable in. Certainly it has things for stage 2, 3, 4, but it also has language that would be off-putting to somebody in stage 1. So that's another way to do it. But you do not have to change the worship service, but then of course you would want to find some other way to reach stage 1. Because a body that only has 3 stages, you're really not a full-fledged body of Christ. Great question. Others? Was there a second part to that question? No. Okay, others? Check one more here. I thought I saw one more. I think I may have gotten all the questions. So, any other questions here? And none other have come in by the cell phone. Thank you for being part of this. I hope this was helpful for you. I hope we can do more of this in the future and actually dig into some more of the topics about this. But it's important that you see, and churches see, discipleship from this perspective. Too often we go back to kind of something we heard somewhere, we have in the back of our head, and it's not even that helpful for discipleship. And most churches are not doing a very good job of discipleship. There's tons of room for growth. So I'm really glad that you're part of this. I'm really glad that you participated in this, and hope it was growing for you. Thanks.